agreement with nature. What does that mean to you?
So I would roughly say, I think Zeno's view, I mean, which was fleshed out later by the next two heads of the Stoa, I think it's pretty coherent, but also something that I learned recently through reading through Cicero in book one of the Academics. Cicero, through the voice of his friend Varro, gives kind of history of Hellenistic philosophy, starting with Socrates and then moving through Plato, Aristotle, and the Stoics. And then he starts to defend the new academy, his academic skepticism, but then the book unfortunately gets cut off. We lost the rest of it, but he at least gets through the Stoics. And one of the things that I learned, at least through Cicero's depiction of it, is this living according to nature thing is actually something that a lot of the other schools held to too. They all thought of it in this way. And I think it's kind of clear. I mean, it's clear in a lot of them. I think it's most clear if you take a look at the Epicureans. The Epicureans wanted to kind of live according to nature to some degree too. And a lot of their practice depends on thinking about what desires are quote unquote natural or not. And the goal of the Epicurean training is to try to whittle one's desire set down to just focus on natural and necessary desires, and to put others to the side or only pick them up very lightly if the opportunity presents itself. But the Epicureans argued through a psychological argument. So they argued sort of from what we would call physics nowadays, or back then they would call physics, is that we have a natural little meter built into our head to say what's healthy for us as humans and what's not. And that's called pleasure and pain. And they actually thought so much of this hedone, the hedonistic component, that they elevated hedone to a criterion of truth. They believe that the proposition X is good can only be true if you get pleasure from it. And that's because nature built this that way. And so an Epicurean may come along and say, like, yeah, you Stoics say you're living according to nature, but sometimes you choose things that are painful. And even painful, they don't come to pleasure down the road. Like, yeah, we're rational and we can think things through and give a little pain right now for more pleasure down the road. But you guys sometimes even say that's not useful. So you say you're living according to nature, but you're ignoring this thing built in our head, this meter that nature gifted us with about what's good for us and what's not. And so in terms of living according to nature, it involves taking a look at kind of how we work situated in the world. But you could come to different conclusions. And again, I would fall back on the importance of logic for this, because if you're thinking to yourself right now, wow, Greg, you just gave a great explanation of Epicureanism. I'm going to be an Epicurean now. I'd be curious if I then explained like another point of view in an equally convincing manner, whether you then switch sides. And if you fluctuate back and forth based on what sounds convincing or good without being able to clearly see what makes things true or false, then I would suggest then more logic and more study of reason may be suitable.